video we're going to talk about dirt bike jetting, and specifically two-stroke dirt bike jetting. So it's a question I get all the time, and it's something that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with until you get it down, because it seems so enigmatic about how to find the right needles and how to find the right jets. So that's what we want to talk about today, just some of the principles behind it, and hopefully you get a better understanding of how this all works. Just a couple of things though to note, and I wrote them down here on this sheet, and I think this can kind of help to help as you think through this. But basically, think of it this way: your carburetor has its primary job is to adjust the fuel-air mixture as it goes into the combustion chamber. So you kind of have to think about air density. How dense the air is going to make a big effect on how your motor is going to run, because it's going to affect the fuel-air mixture. So as the air is more dense, less fuel can come through that little aperture, through your carburetor, because the air is taking up more space. So with that, let's just look at it this way: as temps fall, or as the air becomes denser, air becomes more dense. As temps fall, air becomes more dense. This requires a richer mixture of fuel in order to compensate for that. The same is true with a decrease of altitude, because if we decrease our altitude, if we're riding at 5,000 feet and then we go to riding at 1,000 feet, the air at 1,000 feet is going to be denser. There's going to be more of it. You need to compensate for that by adding more fuel to the mixture to help everything run properly. Inversely, if you're riding at 1,000 feet and then you're going to go to a ride at 10,000 feet, you're going to have less air coming through the carburetor, which means you're going to need to lean out the fuel in order to compensate for that. So let's take a peek at this chart that I've got. So as we talk about jetting, I created this little table here to show some of the different jets that I have, and kind of how they work. You can see that we start with lean on the left, and then we go richer as we go towards the right. So the numbers, these are all main jets. These are on a KTM two-stroke. It's a Keihin, I don't know how you pronounce it, Keihin carburetor. This is for a Keihin PWK 36 SAG. Anyway, these are main jets, and you can see that I've got a 152, a 158, and so on. And then we have needles. Okay, so the needles also have little clips. They have these little clip positions. You can see that this one has actually a clip in it. And those clips will have to be installed as you put them in your carburetor. And then we have some idle jets, and I have a 35 in the bike that represents the dot here, and then for some reason I have two 38 jets. These are richer on the idle jet. So as we talk about this, we kind of have to know how these work in conjunction with one another. So essentially, the jet goes in the bottom of the carburetor, and the jet will be sticking in the bottom of the carburetor like this. The needle will be in the slide. So I don't know how easy. Different needles will have different types of taper, and then you can set your needle up with in different positions. They call that the needle position. So that's determined by the clip. You'll notice that if the clip is in the first needle position, that would be here on this chart. If the clip is in the first needle position, meaning the closest to the top, then that's going to let the needle sit further down in the slide, which will enable that to go further, be always further down inside of the jet. So you can kind of think of it that way. That's how that works. And then if you move the needle position, to a higher number, meaning it's, in the 5th position or something, then you're going to have a situation where that needle is further out of the jet to begin with, and allowing more air and fuel to get through. So smaller numbers generally mean a leaner jet. Richer or bigger numbers indicate a richer jet. So just some principles on that. Okay, let's talk about this data sheet here for a second. This is a printout from the user manual for 2014 KTM 300XCW. And a couple things to note as you go. This is sea level here, and then you go up in sea level all the way up to 10,000 feet. This is your temperature as you go across. So you start at, you know, basically -2 Fahrenheit to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and you go all the way up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's how the graph reads, up and down and left to right. They start you off here, this one is in bold. This is what comes stock in the carburetor. You've got your air screw out, that's ASO. You have idle jet, you have needle, that's the needle that's in it. The needle position is POS, and then you've got MJ for standing for main jet. So when the bike comes shipped from the factory, generally speaking, it's going to have this section here. So it's got a 168 main jet. The needle position will be, it'll be on the 4th position. That's a very rich position. As these numbers get bigger, that's richer and richer because it'll hold it up higher in the slide. And then this is the needle. It was the N4DJ, and it's got the 35 main jet, the idle jet, and air screw is out two turns out from fully closed. So that's air screw out. So one of the things you can look at right away is as you look at this thing and as you study this, you can say, look, what happens here as the temperature falls? Let's just say we stay in this same altitude range. We're at a 168, and then as the temperature falls, I go to 170, and the temperature falls more, I go to 172. What that tells me is that as the temperature falls, I have to richen my mixture. Same thing happens as I go down in altitude. Let's say that I'm up here on this section and I am at 10,000 feet and the temperature remains the same. I'm at a 162. Now I'm at a 165, richer, 168, richer, 170, richer, 172, richer. So basically what we can notice from this and understand is that as the temperature falls, air becomes more dense. So that requires us to have a richer fueled air mixture to compensate for that. You know, the same is true with the decrease of altitude. As we decrease altitude and as we decrease our temperature, that increases the density of the air, and we have to then put more fuel through the carburetor. So here's an example. This is where I've been running my bike a lot. Up here in the high Utah mountains, a lot of the time I'm running on the single track. I'm doing, you know, 7,500 feet and above. I live at about 5,500 feet, or at least 5,000 feet. But a lot of the riding that I've been doing is up in this higher range. What I've noticed about this sheet is this sheet basically usually causes you to run your bike a little bit richer than you'd probably have to, and you can get a little bit more performance out of it if you go a little bit leaner than this says. Case in point, I'm running the bike with basically all these settings, but most of the time the temperature when I'm up at that altitude is lower, so I should be running more in this range. So just food for thought. Here in just a short time, I'm going to go to a different place in Utah to do some riding here in January. I'm going to go down into the St. George area and do some riding. This is what the altitude is going to be, somewhere between 3,000 feet and 4,000, maybe up to 5,000 feet. So I'm in this temperature range, this altitude range. I'm going to be in this temperature range, maybe 40s, 50s, high of 60 possibly. So this would be the setting that KTM recommends. But what I've noticed is they're always telling you run your bike a little bit richer. So I'm going to go diagonal in this thing. You could kind of come diagonal through here, and this is what I'm going to use. So I'm definitely going to richen my bike up. I'm going to go a lot bigger on the main jet, and I'm going to go with a different needle as well. And I'm running this on the 3rd needle position. So you can kind of take this chart and move around on it and get a good idea of what's going to be a good starting point for the bike. Now, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to run it on this section here. And when I get down there, I might find that it's too rich. And if it is, I've got a couple of options. I can either swap my needle and go back to this leaner needle, or I can pull the jet and go back to a little bit leaner jet. I don't have a 160. For some reason I don't have it. That would be the one to kind of use to cut the difference. So we'll just kind of see what happens when I get down there, what I want to do. But that gives you an idea of how you can kind of configure this and what these numbers mean. So it's a very good thing to kind of to grasp the concept. Until two-stroke bikes get EFI, which hopefully they will, but until that time happens, the carburetor system works very good, and it isn't hard to change these things. You can do it in 5 minutes or less, you know. So it's not a burden. You just kind of have to know how to do it, and then you can get a lot more out of your motorcycle and out of your carburetor.